Hi, I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley. We are on chapter 15. I have a whole new setup. I have a new computer. I've got a new camera. Um, New to me. I have a different computer. I have a different camera. Hopefully this will work. I have been trying and trying and trying to make this recording. It's weird because I'm looking at the camera, which is higher than my monitor, so I can't really see the expressions and things that I'm making. I feel like it's in the right spot. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know. But what I do know is that we are reading Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley. We are on chapter 15, the last time, which ended in a train wreck. We had just finished some of the article opinion pieces that she had written for the newspaper, and it had gone back to her regular just narrative commentary. Whew. So we are picking up at her regular narrative commentary. It is stated in the article that the colored people are moving in this matter. The colored people were surprised to hear of Mrs. Lincoln's poverty, and the news of her distress called forth strong sympathy from their warm, generous hearts. Reverend H. H. Garnett of New York City and Mr. Frederick Douglass of Rochester, New York, proposed to lecture in behalf of the widow of the lamented president, and schemes were on foot to raise a large sum of money by contribution. The colored people recognized Abraham Lincoln as their great friend, and they were anxious to show their kind interest in the welfare of his family in some way more earnest and substantial than simple words. I wrote Mrs. Lincoln what we proposed to do, and she promptly replied, declining to receive aid from the colored people. That's interesting to me that she doesn't want to receive aid from black folk. Is it a pride thing? Is it she like black people don't have money anyway? I'm curious. Let's keep reading. I showed her letter to Mr. Garnett and Mr. Douglass, and the whole project was at once abandoned. She afterwards consented to receive contributions from my people. Now, Mrs. Keckley refers to them as my people. Sometimes she refers to them as colored people, sometimes as Africans, sometimes as her people, sometimes not as her people. I kind of feel like maybe they're her people because it's Frederick Douglass and this Mr. Garnett or Reverend Garnett person. I'm not sure. I don't want to be ungenerous to Mrs. Keckley, but like she's in a weird kind of liminal space in society, and I think she's trying to figure out who she is belongs with, right? She was formerly enslaved. She's lived this whole life in the White House. She definitely sees a distinction between herself and other people who have been formerly enslaved, in part just because her enslavement was longer ago than theirs, and she's learned how to kind of get along. I've got a cursor in the middle. I don't know if the cursor's really in the middle of my face. I don't even know what I'm looking at. I don't know if this setup's going to work for me, but we're trying it today. This recording is happening today. All right, I'll stop soliloquizing and keep reading. She afterwards consented to receive contributions from my people, but as the services of Messrs. Douglass, Garnett, and others had been refused when first offered, they declined to take an active part in the scheme, so nothing was ever done. I get that. I offer to help you and you turn down my help. All right, boo, you're on your own. I'm actually not like that in my real life. In my real life, I'm like, huh, okay, you didn't want me to help you, and now you want me to help you, so I'll help you. But in my head, sometimes, like, oh, you want my help now? Um, the following letters were written before Mrs. Lincoln declined to receive aid from the colored people. And this is a quotation of a letter. 183 Bleecker Street, New York, October 16th, 1867. Bleecker Street. Is that the street that Doctor Strange lives on in New York in the Marvel movies? I feel like it is. We got to look this up. Where's my phone? My phone's in my pocket. Oh, I set my book down. The book fell. Um, I am Googling Doctor Strange's address. And then I'll pick up my book. Yes, Doctor Strange lives at 177A Bleecker Street. Huh, that's really interesting. Okay. Happy to have learned that. Um, all right, I'm back to my book. Ooh, it fell down. It's still on the right page though. I'm hot. It's summertime. I'm wearing this shawl because I wanted to. And I have on this new necklace. All right, all right. Look, y'all. I'm clearly a little discombobulated. We're going to read this book. 183 Bleecker Street, New York, October 16th, 1867. J.H. Brady, Esquire. I have just received your favor, together with the circulars. I will do all that lies in my power, but I fear that I will not be as much as but I fear that will not be as much as you anticipate. I think, however, that a contribution from the colored people of New York will be worth something in a moral point of view, and likely that will be the most that will be accomplished in the undertaking. I am thoroughly with you in the work, although but little may be done. I am truly yours, Henry Highland Garnet. P.S. I think it would be well if you would drop a line to Mr. Frederick Douglass at Rochester, New York. H.H.G. And then here's another letter. Rochester, October 18, 1867. My dear Mrs. Keckley, you judge me rightly. I am willing to do what I can to place the widow of our martyr president in the affluent position which her relation to that good man and the country entitles her to. But I doubt the wisdom of getting up a series of lectures for that purpose. That is just the last thing that should be done. Still, if the thing is done, it should be done on a grand scale. The best speakers in the country should be secured for the purpose. You should not place me at the head nor at the foot of the list, but sandwich me between, for thus out of the way it would not give color to the idea, and the word color is emphasized. Um, and I'm assuming this is from Frederick Douglass. Let me look. Yeah, so it's signed Frederick Douglass. So he's saying, I don't think we should do a lecture series to raise money for Mrs. Lincoln, but we can if that's what you want to do. Don't put me at the beginning, don't put me at the end. Stick me in the middle, and then it won't be like this colored people thing. That's really interesting. I am to speak in Newark on Wednesday evening next, and will endeavor to see you on the subject. Of course, it would not be too much to ask. I would gladly see Mrs. Lincoln, if this could be done in a quiet way without the reporters getting hold of it, and using it in some way to the prejudice of that already much abused lady. As I shall see you soon, there is less reason to write you at length. I am, dear madam, with high respect, very truly yours, Frederick Douglass. And now here's another letter. Wow, this letter is long. Oh, it's another letter from Frederick Douglass. It's like 1, 2, 3 pages long. We're about to read it though. Pottsville, October 29th, 1867. My dear Mrs. Keckley, you know the drift of my views concerning the subscription for Mrs. Lincoln. You know the drift, like get my drift. I did not know that that phrase was used back then. This is cool. I mean, I don't know that it's used now, but like, get my drift. Do you get my understanding? It was used in the 1860s. That's awesome. All right. My dear Mrs. Keckley, you know the drift of my views concerning the subscription for Mrs. Lincoln, yet I wish to place them more distinctly before you so that, if you have occasion to refer to me in connection with the matter, you can do so with accuracy and certainty. That's interesting. Is he concerned she would not be accurate or certain? Hmm. It is due Mrs. Lincoln that she should be indemnified, as far as money can do so, for the loss of her beloved husband. Honor, gratitude, and a manly sympathy all say yes to this. I am willing to go farther than this, and say that Mrs. Lincoln herself should be the judge of the amount which shall be deemed sufficient, believing that she would not transcend reasonable limits. The obligation resting on the nation at large is great and increasing, but especially does it become colored men to recognize that obligation. So he's saying um, the amount that the country is indebted is great, but colored men should try to take on part of that as newly freed people. I was going to say citizens, but let me slow my roll. As newly freed people and people trying to build up the country, and what's good for them is kind of a what's good for everybody is good for me sort of an attitude. I'm going to do something different with my camera next time. So I'm standing is why I'm not using, like, if I'm looking at my screen down here, like you you don't see my eyes. And if I look up like this, I think you can see my eyes, but I can't because I can't see the screen. It's weird for me. Maybe I'll grow accustomed to it. but like I can see myself moving on the screen, but not really making any of it out. And I feel like maybe I'm a deer in headlights staring directly at the camera. I'm unsure. You have gotten all of the things with me today. How exciting for you. This is me reading Elizabeth Keckley on my new setup. I like my new setup though, so we're just going to keep going with it. All right. It was the hand of Abraham Lincoln that broke the fetters of our enslaved people and let them out of the house of bondage. When he was slain, our great benefactor fell and left his wife and children to the care of those for whom he gave up all. Shame on the man or woman who, under such circumstances, would grudge a few paltry dollars to smooth the pathway of such a widow. All this and more I feel and believe. But such is the condition of this question, owing to party feeling and personal animosities now mixed up with it, that we are compelled to consider these in the effort we are making to obtain subscriptions. He's like, yes, President Lincoln was our benefactor and we should all be taking care of his widow. However, there are some things we need to consider. Now, about the meeting in Cooper Institute. I hold that the meeting should only be held in concert with other movements. It is bad generalship. That is the word. It literally says generalship. It is bad generalship to put into the field only a fraction of your army when you have no means to prevent their being cut to pieces. Ooh, so, ooh, okay, so he's saying if we do this thing, we need to do it with other things that are going on because you can't only put out a small part of your army when you know they're going to get cut down. Have you seen the video? I don't know who does it. He does several of them, but they're like Jesus videos, but he's doing a rap, and part of it is Peter, and he cuts off the guy's ear, and he goes, slice, slice. Anyway, that's what I had in mind when he's talking about preventing your fraction of an army being cut to pieces. I'm going to try to get it together next time. Today is whatever. You get what you get because I am so happy this is recording and this is working, and I am a little bit giddy, and we're going to keep reading this book. It is gallant to go forth single handed, but is it wise? I want to see something more than the spiteful Herald being a newspaper, behind me when I step forward in the cause at the Cooper Institute. Let Mr. Brady out with his circulars, with his list of commanding names. Let the Herald and Tribune give a united blast upon their bugles. Let the city be placarded and the doors of Cooper Institute be flung wide open, and the people, without regard to party, come up to the discharge of this national duty. Don't let the cause be made ridiculous by failure at the outset. Mm. Don't let this look bad because we got off to a bad start. Mr. Garnet and I could bear any mortification of this kind, but the cause could not. And our cause must not be damaged by any such generalship which would place us in the van unsupported. So he's saying, this is all well and good, but if it blows up and falls flat, which it is going to if we proceed in the manner that you have outlined, it's okay if I look bad. This is Frederick Douglass speaking. And it's okay if Reverend Garnet looks bad, but the cause will look bad and the cause won't recover. I am fascinated by this because, on the one hand, it does sound like wise counsel, but on the other hand, it kind of sounds like some backpedaling. I'll continue reading. I shall not be at home by Saturday. Please write me and let me know how matters are proceeding. Show this letter to Misters Brady and Garnet. I am, dear madam, very truly yours, Frederick Douglass. And now we have another letter from Frederick Douglass. Rochester, October 30th, 1867. My dear Mrs. Keckley, it is just possible that I may not take New York in my route homeward. In that case, please write me directly at Rochester and let me know fully how the subscription business is proceeding. The meeting here last night was a grand success. I speak again this evening and perhaps at Reading tomorrow. My kind regards to all who think of me at 21, including Mrs. Lawrence. Very truly yours, Frederick Douglass. Reading, Reading, Pennsylvania. Like in the Monopoly game, the Reading Railroad, it's spelled reading, but it's pronounced Reading. And I only know this because when I lived on the East Coast, I heard them say it was Reading. So if I'm wrong, Reading, Pennsylvania people, East Coast people, let me know and I'll get it right next time. All right. I assume this is another letter from Frederick Douglass. It is Rochester, November 10th, 1867. My dear Mrs. Keckley, I very easily read your handwriting. With practice, you will not only write legibly but elegantly, so no more apologies for bad writing. Penmanship has always been one of my own deficiencies, and I know how to sympathize with you. So I guess in one of her return letters, which is interesting to me that we don't see her return letters. What are you thinking in this conversation? Where's your voice in this conversation? We are hearing your voice in that we are getting your curated letters from Frederick Douglass and all of the other people, but like, where are your responses? And why were you talking about bad writing in a letter to him? And did you mean bad penmanship? Did you mean something different? But back to the idea of curating what we get as readers. So when you're doing academic research, for example, if you are writing a literature review, part of the purpose of that is to give a taste of the conversation that is happening in that field between the scholars of that field, and you eventually will insert yourself as a scholar in the field. So you have to curate what is there and say this person said this and this person replied with this and this person said this, but we don't get that give and take here. We just get the letters that Mrs. Keckley has chosen to include in here, which is a curation of its own. I'm fascinated. All right, we'll keep reading. This is Frederick Douglass talking in his letter. I am just home and find your letter awaiting me. You should have received an earlier answer but for this absence. I am sorry it will be impossible for me to see you before I go to Washington. I am leaving home this week for Ohio and shall go from Ohio to Washington. I shall be in New York a day or two after my visit to Washington and will see you there. Any public demonstration in which it will be desirable for me to take part ought to come off the last of this month or the first of next. I thank you sincerely for the note containing a published letter of dear Mrs. Lincoln. Both letters do credit to the excellent lady. I prize her beautiful letter to me very highly. It is the letter of a refined and spirited lady, let the world say what it will of her. I would write her a word of acknowledgement, but for fear to burden her with correspondence. That's weird. I would write her a word saying, I received your letter, but I don't want to overburden her with correspondence. I mean, this was 1867. The only way she's really going to know if you got her letter is if you write her a letter back. And still, even months could transpire between that. But like, you can't send her a text, you can't send her an email. I'm unsure of when phones were invented, but if they existed at this point, which I don't think they did, they weren't in wide use. The only way you knew if the letter you sent off into the void to somebody was received was if they sent you a letter back. And he's like, I'm not going to send her a letter back for fear of overburdening her with correspondence. I call foul on that. He just doesn't want to write her back. All right, I'm going to keep reading. I am glad that Mr. Garnett and yourself saw Mr. Greeley and that he takes the right view of the matter, but we want more than rigid views, and delay is death to the movement. Delay is death. That sounds like something you would hear a CEO say. What you now want is action and cooperation. If Mr. Brady does not, for any reason, find himself able to move the machinery, somebody else should be found to take his place. He made a good impression on me when I saw him, but I have not seen the promised simultaneous movement of which we spoke when together. I like this side of Frederick Douglass that I'm getting. He's like, I'm a general. These are the things we got to do. These are the things we aren't going to do. So and so isn't getting his work done, so we need to step it up and do something else. All right, I'll keep reading. This whole thing should be in the hands of some recognized solid man in New York. No man would be better than Mr. Greeley. No man would be better than the man that I have already earmarked to do this. Imagine. No man in the state is more laughed at, and yet no man is more respected and trusted. A dollar placed in his hands would be as safe for the purpose as in a burglar-proof safe, and what is better still, everybody believes this. This testimonial must be more than a Negro testimonial. It is a great national duty. Mr. Lincoln did everything for the black man, but he did it not for the black man's sake, but for the nation's sake. His life was given for the nation, but for being president, Mr. Lincoln would have been alive, and Mrs. Lincoln would have been a wife and not a widow, as now. Do all you can, dear Mrs. Keckley. Nobody can do more than you in removing the mountains of prejudice towards that good lady and opening the way of success in the plan. I am, dear madam, very truly yours, Frederick Douglass. So earlier, when I was saying Frederick Douglass was like the colored people should work with the indebtedness of the nation, I mean that and I still hold by that. But I think he was more so talking about the indebtedness of the nation to Mrs. Lincoln, which makes more sense than what I was saying, just the national debt. But we just got out of a war and we owe big. I think it can be all of it. Um, oh, I don't know how long I've been reading. I feel like it's been about 20 minutes. There's just so much left. Why is this so long? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, we're almost to the appendix, which I was planning on reading you, but whew, I'm tired. Oh my gosh, we really are almost to the appendix. Okay, so we are on page 323, and the and chapter 15 ends on page 331. Woo! Okay, we're gonna stop for now. The end of chapter 15 is in sight. This is who am I? I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley. Until next time.